Welcome, welcome. We are back for another episode of The Lock-In. I'm David Lappin, and I'm joined by strategy author and guru Dara O'Kearney. Dara.
Hi David, great to be here. It's a while since we've done one of these at our desk. We did a couple while we were away in Vegas, obviously, and we did put out that one with Niall that we pretended was from recently, but was actually from almost the start of this year. So
Yeah,
this is the first time I think we've done one of these in about 3 months.
it has been a while. Has been a while. It's been a busy period, right? Lots of live, lots of content.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Since I got back from Vegas, I've been concentrating mostly on coaching and content. Obviously, Barry and I just launched our tournament poker strategy simplified course, which we'll be talking about, I think, later in the show.
Indeed.
I've been doing a lot of coaching as well. The reason why we're recording this lock-in is that in 2 days I will be disappearing off to play live again for 3.5 weeks. Starting in Dublin, there's a 1K on Friday. There's an Irish poker tour stop over the weekend, and then Monday I head to Barcelona for 2 weeks, and then straight to Malta. Actually, not even coming home, just flying straight from Barcelona to Malta for the festival.
Yeah, crazy busy week, and weeks, in fact, ahead. But yeah, we will pick up. Actually, I'm very keen to talk about your latest strategy video. But first, I'd like to introduce our guest this week. She is poker player and advocate. She runs the Globe-trotting poker and Globe-trotting women poker groups on Facebook. She is also the newest Flagwanker. If she needs explanation, I will offer it in a moment. She is our friend Maureen Bloechlinger. Maureen, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me, guys.
So great to have you on, Maureen. Okay, so for those of you out there, and for Maureen perhaps who don't know what a flagwanker is, it's a term I coined for our good pal Andy Hill several years ago when he was, let's say, a Hendon flag chaser. He was sort of, I think he was trying to upset the political climate in different countries so that new countries may exist the following year so he could get their flag. He took it to that sort of level. That's obviously before he got loved up and distracted by domestic bliss. It seems, though, that the mantle has been passed to you, Maureen. You've been going after these flags fairly aggressively and relentlessly this year. Pre-Vegas, you went to Malaysia, Liechtenstein, Slovakia, Monte Carlo, France, Czech Republic, Slovenia. And they're just the places you got flags in. You may have gone to other places too. Can you tell me about your travels?
Yes. So I think that wanker thing is a very British term. So I like to call myself a flag hunter. But yeah, so it's pretty funny because David and I ran into each other at the WSOP, and he was like, "Oh my God, I had no idea, you've been to so many places." So my focus this year, was to get many flags. I think I'm at 9 so far this year, with some plans coming up. I will also be traveling for the next couple of weeks, like you guys, trying to get more flags. So for me, it just comes out of a passion for, discovering new countries. And what's a better excuse than to play poker in these new countries?
Brilliant stuff. Well, Dara, I joke about the flag wanker stuff, but actually, you and I have often talked about how strange sometimes not even financial goals can serve as nice motivation. You, for example, used to chase those triple crowns to motivate yourself for years. I recently attended a UK IPT London to chase UK IPT leaderboard and was even considering going to Dust Till Dawn. Okay, that one I will have to admit was financial. It would have to be financial to get me to Nottingham. But can you talk a little bit about finding motivation that isn't just about money and actually maybe injects a bit of fun into these goals?
Yeah, so before I started playing poker in different countries, my husband and I would like to watch, different concerts in different countries. So we do have this passion for traveling. And, for the sport and game like poker, where 80% of the time it's very disappointing. We come home empty-handed, maybe with only the lessons we learned. Why not discover a new country along the way? So as you mentioned, I do have some flags, and of course, it's sometimes frustrating. I've been to um, two other places this year where I did come up empty-handed. So one was the WP, I know, one was the WPT voyage, and the other was Lithuania. But again, you try your hardest, you play your best at the table, but those beats I would have to say were very hard because that means I do need to go back to try to cash and get the flag.
Exactly. It's a tough one. Dara, talk to me a little bit about how you use this kind of motivation as well.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points here. Like one thing is that not everybody plays poker for the same reason. Like recreational players play to have fun, and that's a huge part of their motivation. And Maureen's talked very eloquently there about the sort of edifying nature of travel, and that's a kind of a side effect to what she's doing and what her approach is. Even for professionals, it has a lot of merit because we have a very strange relationship to money, which is that money is obviously in the same way as it is for everybody else, we need it to live, but it's also the tool of our trade. If we run out of money, we're done, or at least we have to go off and get staked. Um, so we have to be very careful about our money, but we also have to be quite stoical about it. Like you can't feel the every upswing and downswing personally, like every tournament you busted didn't cash. You just can't do that sort of emotional roller coaster to yourself. So in a sense you become almost immune to monetary swings. And it's not actually good to peg your hopes and dreams to monetary swings because, as I said, when it's going bad, that's when you really need help. But then it becomes hard, like the question becomes, well, how do you motivate yourself if you're not focusing on money and trying to win money? So it can be useful to chase other things like leaderboards or I mean, ultimately, you should just be focusing on the process, though, as a professional. Play the right tournaments, play as many of them as possible, play them in as good a state of mind as possible, and approach every decision as well as possible. But we're all humans, and we do need these additional incentives. So any additional incentives that we can find for ourselves, be it meaningless online awards like Pocket Five Triple Crowns or leaderboards, which do actually have a financial reward in the case of the UK IPT one that you were leading they're all very helpful in that sense.
Indeed, they are. Very nice deconstruction there, Dara. Maureen, you went to the WSOP. As you mentioned, we bumped into one another. We actually played together for a few hours in a bracelet event too. You told me about your plans to do a Baltic trip with friend and friend of the show, Jason Glatzer. And I noticed you picked up flags in Latvia and Estonia since. Can you tell me about that trip?
Yeah, sure. This all started because in my Facebook group, Globe-trotting Poker, I posted, hey guys, WSOP Tallinn just announced a women's ring event for July. I want to play poker in Tallinn, but are there any other tournaments happening around the same time, either before and after, that I could catch some different countries? So then Jason, of course, contacted me and he goes, actually, let's just do a road trip. Let's go visit different casinos, play at different casinos, experience the Baltics. I have never visited him before in the Baltics. I'm like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So we kicked off in his hometown of Vilnius, Lithuania. Then we went to Klaipėda. I probably just killed the pronunciation, but one of the cities along the coast. Then we headed to Riga, Latvia, and then ended at the WSOP in Tallinn. So I still have to do some post-production because we did a mini vlog on that, and I will have some trip guidelines for those countries coming out soon as well on Poker Pro, who was one of our sponsors.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah, no, I was watching your Instagram updates, or maybe it was Facebook Live updates, was something anyway. Because I think I might have even still been at the World Series. It was like that time warp where we'd seen each other like 36 hours previously, at the bottom of the escalator, where the daily deep stacks were played. And then I was suddenly looking at you on my phone in a very different climate, in a very different part of the world. But yeah, it seemed like an awful lot of fun. You mentioned there the Globe-trotting Poker, and obviously you are the head honcho of Globe-trotting Poker and Globe-trotting Poker women Facebook groups. Can you tell us about how those groups came into being in the first place?
Yeah, so I first started with the Globe-trotting Poker Women. That was 2016. And, when I first started coming or going to the World Series of Poker, the ladies would ask me, oh, like, can I play poker in Switzerland? Where can I go? What's happening? What's going on? So then that's how the original Globe-trotting Poker Women group formed. And I would post, different women's events happening around the world. There's something here in Malta, there's something here in Barcelona, etc. Then, of course, the pandemic came. And I was actually at King's Casino when the border shut. And I had some information, about casino closures because everything happened first in Europe. Then the women were like, this is really good information, but your group's closed for women. I'm like, yeah, I know, because that's what I wanted, to help women in poker. And they're like, no, you need to put this information out there for everyone. So then that's how I started the Globe-trotting Poker, putting in information about where you could play during COVID, which locations opened first, what were the rules, etc. And then basically just putting all the different content, you can play here, there, everywhere. And for me, Hendon Mob is a very good source, and there's other sources that tell where you can play poker. But what our group does is you can ask questions, like the questions you're dying to know, is it a smoke-free environment? How's the food? Do they speak English? And these kind of questions, I think you can only get from answers in a community, not, or, someplace like Reddit, not, from a spreadsheet.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. It's a great resource. And obviously it's one where you let Dara and I post our articles too. And we really appreciate you letting us do that, Maureen. With every passing year, the original Facebook function seems to play a smaller and smaller role in our lives. But we do still use Messenger. And actually this group function is as healthy as ever from what I can see. Can you talk about the importance of groups like Maureen's there, Dara? Other groups I know we use, Ace High on the Bubble, Poker Guru, Cash Poker, the Irish Poker Forum have one as well. They perform a similar role in galvanizing the community.
Yeah, absolutely. They provide a community aspect essentially. Like right from the start, I've only ever used social media to promote my poker career. I sort of separated my private life from that, and I grew up in the era before social media, so people were not really used to living their social lives online. A lot of my friends are around the same age as well, and they wouldn't necessarily appreciate me putting up photos of us eating that to be looked at by a couple of hundred Irish poker players. So but coming back to the groups, like the groups are a great sort of central hub. And this is kind of just the history of the internet. Like when the internet started, it was sort of like the view is, well, everybody's an individual port and everybody will have their home page and that will be it. But what's happened over time is, we are communal creatures and we flock to groups. So all these groups have popped up. That's just sort of the way humans function. We like to form groups, in this case, interest groups, and even, niches within that, like, Irish poker players have their own forum. As Maureen said, there's Globe-trotting for women and there's Globe-trotting, which is also for men. And these are just great information resources as well in a time when it can actually be quite hard to get good centralized information. Like the information is so diffuse on the internet and there's so much bad information there as well, that something like Maureen's group, which sort of is vetted and that the information on there is good, it serves a really important function, I think.
Yeah, well said. But back to you, Maureen, actually, for one final thing on this. You work very hard putting together, I know, the women's event poker calendar for your group. It's nice because it makes it feel, I guess, like a circuit for those players. They can travel. They might see familiar faces then, form friendships, which is obviously, something that always makes traveling more appealing. Can you talk a little bit about that and also tell us about your role in the upcoming MPF Malta Poker Festival? We have Yvonne Montialegre on the next show, and I know she's very excited to have you on board.
Yes. So like I said earlier, I used to always and still post about the events coming up. And I did get the feedback that a lot of people don't want to, be in a community. They want the information, but maybe don't need the community feel. So then that's when I started to put everything on the website as well. So the website was first branded Globe-trotting Poker. Then I rebranded it last January to Women's Poker Calendar, but it's the same information, same format. And basically you can search, which country you want to play in or which month, and there's all the tournaments listed for women. So sometimes I get a lot of negativity when I do this. I'm like, but look, like, let's be realistic. If I'm traveling all the way to Taipei, of course, as a woman, I'll give Asian Poker Tour a try because they actually offer 3 women's events. And at these events, for sure, I'm going to meet other women. For sure, I have a chance, to make new friends and just like talk and discuss. Because otherwise, let's face it, 3% or less is our representation at the poker tables. And that's why I try to put the focus on the women's event as well. And that's why when I travel, I also try to hit the series that offer women's events for this reason. So Malta Poker Festival, yeah, one of my favorite festivals. They always include the Ladies First event. And what I will be doing for the festival is offering and hosting off-felt activities. So I did this before last year. So we did a city tour, a private rooftop bus around Valletta. We did scuba diving one year. We also did a catamaran tour and some different meet and greets and parties. So for me, it's my passion. You know, poker is one aspect, but again, there's more to these destinations than just sitting around the table. You know, get out there, explore, learn about the world, and do something new.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yvonne and the Malta Poker Festival are very lucky to have you. Speaking of articles going up on these various sites of yours, Globe-trotting and whatnot, I want to turn now to a couple of recent articles, which allows me to get back to what I know Dara is dying to talk about, which is his new strategy video that he has released with Barry Carter. Dara, it's called Tournament Poker Study Simplified, and it breaks down the fundamentals of poker while also giving the viewer, let's say, a framework for how to study poker on their own without a coach. What is the reason or motivation for doing it? What's your main objective with the course? Like, are you not maybe putting yourself out of business?
Well, that pretty much is the objective. Basically, like as you know better than anybody, my sort of trajectory as a coach it's something I originally started doing. Actually, I think maybe the very first coaching I ever did was I taught you and Dara Davy how to play satellites in my house one afternoon. Around the time when the 3X satellites appeared on the scene. Then we were staking a bunch of players, so we used to coach them. And you know, I would be the first to admit that I was the weakest coach in the group at the time, because my answer to almost every question was it depends. But then the solvers came along, and I really threw myself into them, and the solvers completely changed things. I liked the sort of certainty you can get that if you could say, okay, well, these are the ranges, these are the bet sizes that are likely to be used, and this is the exact answer that nobody can argue with. I think one of the reasons why I didn't maybe shine in the group circumstances that you're a very good arguer, David. I don't think anyone's ever won an argument. So, you were always going. Whereas when the solvers came on, you would argue really eloquently, and I would say, "Yeah, David, that's very nice, but here's my screen, and you're wrong."
Computer says no.
Yeah, computer says no, exactly. So then I started coaching other people. Now, initially, I was coaching mostly what I would describe as wannabe pros, people who wanted to be pros, and I had a very my approach that was always I'm going to teach them how to study. I'm going to teach them how to use the solvers the way that I use them, rather than teach them the whole of poker. But then over time, more and more recreational players came to me, and I kind of realized that in a lot of cases, like recreationals don't want to run their own solves. They don't want to spend a lot of time staring at solvers. They just kind of want the quick answer. You know, what do I do on this spot? And then the latest sort of iteration, the way poker training has moved on, is the arrival of GTO Wizard and Range Trainer Pro and all those other Odin, all those lookup tools, which actually are great for recreationals because they're much easier to use than PO, Hold'em Resources Calculator, all the old solvers that were there. So lots of recreationals came to me, sort of not exactly complete beginners, but near enough to beginners, like not knowing anything about solvers, not knowing anything about GTO, and they wanted me to teach them poker. So initially, I kind of floundered around about the best way to do it, but over time, I developed a very streamlined approach. Like in my mind, there's three basic aspects to tournaments. There's GTO, which is the way it should work. There's exploitative, which the way it does actually work, and then there's ICM, which is also super important in tournaments. So I kind of taught those three things separately, in a set order. Taught things like overbetting, donk leading on flops, how to evaluate turns, all of the stuff, all of what I consider the fundamentals. But the objective was not to teach people how to play poker. The objective was say, look, this is how you would use something like GTO Wizard to learn yourself. Now, at the end of the course, they'll obviously they have learned a lot about the specific topics that I've covered, like ICM, overbetting, range betting, all this stuff. But really, the objective is to teach them how to sort of continue on with their own study afterwards. over time, I found what was happening was I was literally giving the same 20 hours of coaching over and over and over again to every new recreational that came along. And I thought, well, this isn't a very efficient use of my time. And, it could also be made a lot more economic from the student's perspective, where I could just record the 20 hours with Barry, which is what we did, and sell it for a tiny fraction of what 20 hours of coaching with me costs. And you still get all the information, and hopefully at the end of the course, as my recreational students have been able to do, they sort of go off and now they're self-sufficient from a study perspective. So yeah, I mean, to answer your question, it is kind of to put myself out of a job, at least that part of my job, which is just repeating the same 20 lessons over and over again.
Very good. Well, Maureen, turning to you, actually, Dara likes to start off with the fundamentals, as he just said there, his three pillars of GTO, exploits, and ICM. It's a teach a man to fish sort of approach. How much work do you put into the fundamentals off the felt?
I study a lot at the moment, and the tools he mentioned are my go-to tools as well. GTO Wizard, although, some controversy, on X about it, but like Dara said, I love the format. It's easy for recreational players. It's easy to understand. It's, I can input certain spots and then, analyze it and say, okay, maybe that was the bottom of my range. I should have folded, or, against this type of player, I should have done this, etc. So I really do like it. I got Dara's email, and I have to say, I really like his stuff. Even, his satellite stuff helped me a lot. And I just like studying his methods because he puts it out in a very clear format. Even, some of the other coaches, they may be brilliant, but from a delivery point of view, I'm like, okay, I'm totally lost. We're only 2 minutes into this, recorded lesson. But with Dara, it's very simple, very easy to understand. And also with GTO Wizard.
Yeah, well said. I think Dara's communication skills have always sort of set him apart from a lot of the elite coaches. Back to you, Dara, for a final word on this. Obviously, you'd like the course to sell very well. I know you've put a lot of time into it, but as a coach, I know you probably get more of a kick these days out of the big results of your students, actually. By streamlining the early part of the coaching process, as this video is designed to do, are you hoping to have more students going forward, but sort of get to fast forward to the more advanced bits with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I did an interview on Twitch during the week, and I was asked like, what was motivation? I gave the answer I more or less gave now, that I don't want to keep repeating the same thing over and over again. And then the follow-up question was, well, what do you like about coaching? And I thought about it, and like my favorite thing in coaching is when a student goes, let's say, makes a big final table. And often we will do a session either the evening before or the morning before, where I will talk them through the ICM of their stack, and different situations that could arise, like if they double up, what that will mean for their strategy, etc., etc. And that's always endlessly fascinating to me, because every time it's different. Like no two final tables are the same. There's different stack distributions to consider. There's whether you're in position or out of position to the chip leader. There's different payout structures. There's different player tendencies. There's all that stuff. So that stuff is fascinating to me. I mean, I'm lucky that people pay me to do that, because I actually find it so interesting that if nobody would ever pay me, I'd probably do it for free. But that's very much the hope. Like I love when my students do well when they make final tables. And if they come to me then for the specific final table coaching, that's even better. That I feel very involved in the process then.
Brilliant stuff. Well, look, from Dara's recent article to mine, 2 weeks ago or so, I wrote about late registration, a piece I've been meaning to get to actually for quite a long time. And it got quite a big response, actually, which I was obviously delighted to see. But I think that's probably because it's definitely something that really badly needs to be looked at the moment. The way I framed the piece, Dara, and this is something we've spoken about before on this show, is that there was a moment of epiphany, say, quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when sharper players started to much better understand where their EV in tournaments was, or where it came from. The more and more players that shifted from the view then that a starting stack with a sub-average stack, that was a sub-average stack, if you like, was disadvantageous, and suddenly the realization that it was actually an advantage to buy in when so many others had already busted. The ICM bump, if you want to call it that, by latecomers obviously has to come from somewhere, and in a zero-sum game, it comes from the early birds who have maybe increased their stacks, but the value of those increased stacks have actually been devalued. I say that in the article, this created a if you can't beat them, join them mentality among the pros, with more and more of them opting for the last minute late registration. And we really do see that in evidence across the world now, with people hopping in last minute. I also said you can't blame a player for doing what's in their best interest, but you can blame the organizer for creating a structure that can be so blatantly exploited. In my opinion, as soon as the benefits of late registration became common knowledge, steps should have been taken to reduce the period in which it was permissible, but incredibly, it seemed to go the other way, with organisers extending it further. Maureen, we sat together in the tournament, which actually I think probably ultimately was the straw that broke the camel's back and got me to write this piece. I actually case studied it in the article when hundreds upon hundreds of players max late reg WSOP 1K that we were sitting in. So many, in fact, that the egregious already 10 big blind late reg was actually a 6.6 big blind for lots of them because they didn't actually get seeded until the next level. How do you feel about this phenomena? Has it gone too far in your eyes?
I agree. I think it has gone too far. I'm on the team, let's stop late reg at 20 big blinds. I don't think that we should stop late reg completely. And again, like you said, it's the organizers. And as a recreational player, yeah, I mean, it hurts. You know, I started that 1K at the beginning. I thought that was the proper strategy for me, you know, kind of chip up. And then basically, I think we had 3 newcomers at our table because they also had to do table balance, right, to make room for all the late regs. And then it was just coming down to coin flips and calling off. And unfortunately, you know, I lost my coin flip. It actually happened last week to me as well. They were allowing late reg with 6 big blinds, and I'm just like, I don't know. I don't even know if I want to support then this organization anymore. This is just terrible. And again, you know, when organizations make their structure clear, then us as players can make the decision, okay, they're allowing late reg to 6 big blinds. Do I want to play in this tournament? Yes or no? And if I know that people can register 6 big blinds, then what am I going to do?
Yeah, well said. Dara, I said how there is, I called it implicit collusion here between the organisers and the sharp players, that later late registration deep into the tournament meant more rake with a lower impact on dealer costs. That makes sense. And more profitable spots for the players. That also makes sense for them to exploit that fact. I wasn't being conspiratorial with that comment. It's more like a gradual thing, I think, probably took place where it got pushed further and further, and organizers started realizing it was better and better for them, and sharp players started realizing that the exploit got more egregious and they would take advantage of it. We worked together with Unibet in trying to find a compromise on this very issue a couple of years ago, and I say in the piece how our idea boiled down to a maths discovery that you made previously when you wrote about 30 big blind stacks, or I think it was like the 25 to 35 kind of range. We actually did a chip race topical on that very subject, and I think we called it the awkward stack. And you reiterated actually some of the points of that in a recent lock-in, one of those WSOP lock-ins. Without going into the why it's the awkward stack again, because I guess we've done that, would you mind explaining how this pertains to a possible solution for the fairer last minute late reg point?
Yeah, the basic idea is that at deep stacks, the deeper the stacks, the bigger skill edges that the better players will have over weaker players. You know, if a very skilled player is playing 1,000 blinds deep against an unskilled player, they will have a much bigger win rate and edge than if they're both playing with 100 blinds. And they'll have a bigger win rate at 100 big blinds than they will have at 60. And they'll have a bigger win rate at 60 than they will at 40, and so on down. But there is an inflection point. There is a point somewhere in that, what you call the awkward stack zone, 25 to 30, where actually it starts to go up again, and suddenly being short becomes an advantage. And this is why in cash games, you're not allowed to buy in for 5 big blinds, for example, because it would give you a huge advantage. In that case, the short stacks are actually stealing full equity from the big stacks. If everybody had 5 big blinds, there would be no advantage. But if you have 5 big blinds and everybody has 100 big blinds, for example, if you shove under the gun, well, the guys behind might have a hand which is in good shape against your range, but they have to worry about all the players behind who have 100 big blinds. So they actually have to fold tighter than if everybody had 5 big blinds. So there is this stack depth, which is sort of like fundamentally sort of just the worst stack size to have. That's somewhere between 20 and 30 big blinds. So if you force people when they late reg to come in with the stack size, some of the ICM bump that they get goes back to the fact, by virtue of the fact that their stack size is just a bad stack size for them to have. And this is not a widely understood idea, because a lot of people think it's actually the case that just the shorter you get, the worse it is for you. But as I said, like, that's not the case. Actually, you know, under the old-fashioned ante system where everybody anteed up, the most profitable stack size imaginable would be exactly 1 ante, because you'd be all in, so you get to play 100% of hands. You know, only 2 or 3, maybe 4 players are going to contest the pot. Yes, you're probably only going to win, say, 20% of the time. But when you do win, guess what? You multiply your ante by 9 or 10, depending on the number of players at the table. So your actual ROI on that is well over 100%. So that's the basic maths of it. This is something we wrote at length about in the ICM book. Like, this is something that has been widely known among pros, both these things, that there's an ICM bump and that certain stack sizes are worse than others. But they haven't been widely publicized. And my attitude has always been that they should be publicized, because recreations should be aware of this. It shouldn't be just pros who should be aware that there's an advantage to late regging. Most recreations, their natural intuition is, oh no, it must be a disadvantage to come in because you're coming in shallower. But you know, that's not the case. And actually, if you're coming in very shallow, like, as I said, it's better to come in with 6 big blinds than to come in with 30 big blinds. So the example you gave, that was a particularly egregious one. I was one of the max late reggers, and I remember looking up at the screen after they had sat us all and working out that almost half the remaining field were max late reggers, and half the remaining field were going to cash. So that was just ridiculous. Like, we were all probably at that stage, even though we were below average, we were probably 25 or 30% to cash the tournament, whereas people who were there at the start were, you know, 15%.
Yeah, absolutely insane. One final point on this, actually, because I watched the Only Friends episode on this last week. It was episode 578, if anyone wants to check it out. And I noticed that there was actually a comment by Matt Berkey that was left unchecked. Not trying to get at Matt here, because I very much appreciate him amplifying the issue, and the lads did a good job of discussing the subject from a few different angles. I also appreciate that he's speaking off the cuff when he makes a comment like this, and he's a cash game guy, frankly, as well. He's not a tournament guy, so that's another reason. But there was a moment when he said that the fact that lots more people have entered the tournament increases the value of a player's stack, and that has a balancing out effect on how their stack has been devalued by the players who snipe that equity of late regging. Now, that simply doesn't hold up at all, right, Dara? And I think you can maybe illustrate that with maybe some graphical evidence.
Yeah, it really doesn't hold up at all. But this is the way people used to think. And, you know, as you said, like, Matt's a cash game player. This is kind of, it sounds like common sense. But if you think about it, like, the two things can't be true. There can't be an ICM bump for the people who come in late, and at the same time, the people who are there already somehow gain equity too. The prize pool gets bigger, but the players who are in the tournament, their share of it is smaller as a result of the late comers. Now, we could try and logic this out and talk about, I could try and explain it logically, but generally the best way to explain any mathematical thing is just to do a demonstration. So at the risk of, this is the first time I think we've done this kind of thing, so this might blow up in our face, but I'm going to share my screen.
Drum roll here as Dara tries to share a screen.
We're going down the
Hopefully that doesn't mess up the whole Zoom.
Dodgy road of prop comedy now. But okay, so I'm hoping you guys can see my screen now.
We can.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an ICM calculator which is available on the internet on the ICMizer site, and it just does ICM calculations. So, you know, you can put in your stack. It can only do up to 15 players, but, you know, you can put in a prize pool and you can work out what everybody's equity is. So for the purposes of this demonstration, and this is just an example, but this is a tournament that has 20 runners at the start. You know, so it's a small high roller or whatever. Everybody paid 1,000 plus rake, so the prize pool is 20,000, and that's divided. Half of it is going to first, 30% is going to second, and the remaining 20% is going to third. So 15% of the field is paid, which again is what is pretty much industry standard these days in bigger tournaments as well. As I said, we're just using this as an example. Now, at this stage of the tournament, we're saying that there are 10 players left. So half the field have been eliminated, and registration is still open. And the stacks have moved around a bit, but everybody started with 1,000 chips. Chip Leader has had a great tournament so far. He's up to 5,000. There's a couple of guys who are actually down below starting stack because their tournament's not going so well. But the total in play is 20,000, 20 starting stacks. So if we calculate everybody's equity, the ICM calculator goes away and tells us how much each stack is worth. And as you can see, when you have more chips, your equity is less than your chip stack. So the Chip Leaders has 5,000 in chips, but only 4,473 in equity. The player with the least amount of chips has 800, but their equity is more than 800. That's just the way ICM works. Now the question is, what if somebody comes along and late-regges? So we bring in an 11th player, and they've just bought in now. So they have a starting stack, exactly 1,000. They've obviously added an extra 1,000 to the prize pool. So 500 of that has been added to first place because first place is getting half. 300 has been added to second because second place is getting 30%, and the remaining 200 of their buy-in is going to third. And the other stacks haven't changed at all. They are the same. As the only thing that's happened is now we have this 21st player, and he's boosted the chip count in the tournament up to 21,000 with his 1,000, and he's added an extra 1K to the prize pool. Now, I want you to focus on the value of his stack. Remember, he's just paid 1,000 right now for it. His 1,000 is worth 1,087 and 82. So he's made 87 and 82 in equity just by late-regging. And this is a zero-sum game. Like, this doesn't come from nowhere. It's not like the organizers suddenly reached into their pocket and added an extra 87, 82 to the prize pool. What's happened here is that money has come from all of the other players. All of their equities have dropped by the virtue of the fact that he came into the tournament. Another way of looking at this is that every time a late-regger comes in this example, he's making over $80 euro, whatever the currency is. That's coming from the people who started the tournament. So retrospectively, their buy-in is worth €4 less. It's like they're putting their hand in their pocket and giving him €4. So their 1,000 is only worth 996. The more of these guys there are, the worse it is, because everybody who's coming in is getting this bump, and that equity is always coming from the other players. Their equity is dropping. Now, this, you might say, okay, well, big deal. So he's getting an extra 8% and everybody's losing less than 0.5%. That's not really that big a deal. And it isn't. If it was the case that tournaments only allowed people to come in to this point in the tournament where only half the field are gone, then I don't think late reg would be a major issue. But let's take a more extreme example now. We're going to take the exact same tournament, but we're going to say that we're down to 5 players and late reg is still open. So we're getting near the bubble now. And this is closer to the situation that happened in the WSOP event that we were talking about. So we still have the same prize pool because we have 20 buy-ins. We still have the stacks adding up to 20,000. I've just randomly put in different stack sizes to get a total of 20,000. And again, if we do the calculation, we'll see as before that the guys with the big stacks, the chip leader, his stack is worth a lot less than the 8,000, and the shortest stack, his stack is worth more. Now we're going to do the same thing and add one more player to the tournament because he's allowed to enter. So he enters, he increases the chips in the tournament by 1,000. He increases the prize pool by 1,000, which is added to first, second, and third proportionally. And now if we look at how much his stack is worth, it's worth 1,270. Now that's a really big jump. So he's making an extra 27% just by max late regging because 75% of the field are gone. And that 270 is coming from everybody who started the tournament. So in this example, everybody who started the tournament is actually losing $13, $14 in equity by virtue of the fact that they came in at the start.
Dara, that's a really brilliant example, and thank you for putting it so clearly to us there. I think what really comes across, some people might immediately jump at the idea of like, oh, well, you've made it very top heavy because the payout structure has had to fit into this particular kind of calculation. And we accept that this isn't a perfect example of anything that we've seen. This is just a toy game or a toy sample of what can happen. And yeah, it probably wasn't exactly that. It might have been worse. It might have been better. We don't really know, because it's all going to ultimately come down to the stack distributions, right?
Yeah, the stack distribution, like that's just a specific example. If I had used slightly different stack sizes, but all still adding up to 20,000, we would have got slightly different results. The best case scenario for the person coming in late is that the stacks have really moved out wide apart. So there's a huge chip lead, there's lots of big stacks, there's lots of small stacks, because that means he's competitive against the small stacks and he has a very good chance of getting into the money. The worst case scenario is everybody has exactly the same amount of chips. Let's say everybody has doubled up basically since the tournament started. So he's coming in, but believe it or not, he's still getting a boost in that scenario. And of course, that's never going to actually happen. Of course, in any real world, the stacks will move apart. The more they move apart, the better a boost he will get. And the biggest boosts come in satellites. Like some of the boosts in satellites are just insane. I have actually done the maths on these, and you can get up to a 60 to 80% boost fairly routinely by max late-regging a satellite, and in some cases even more so. I remember an Irish Open satellite years ago. I was preparing to max late-reg it, and I saw that they were down to only 5, and there were 2 seats, and one guy had nearly all the chips, and everybody else was below starting stack. So when I max late-regged, I came in second in chips. So I had better than 20% chance of winning a seat now, way better, because I was well ahead of some of the guys. My chance of winning a seat were probably 30%, something like that, even not allowing for any skill edge. And if I'd come in at the start, my chances were only 10%. So basically my buy-in was worth 3 buy-ins. So I got a 200% boost in that one. So I was on the wrong end of a really extreme example a few days ago. I was playing a satellite for the London Festival, and I got heads up. I had played it from the start because it needed a certain number of runners to get started. And I was heads up. There was a package for first and there was cash for second. I lost the heads up. And as I bust, somebody entered the tournament. And so I didn't get second prize. I got third. I got nothing. They were now guaranteed second prize, which was more than their buy-in. And they still had a chance to win, and they didn't end up winning. But that's an extreme example, but it does show that the nearer you get to the bubble, the greater the boost will be.
Yeah, look, brilliantly done. And I hope, for anybody out there who doubts what we've been sort of saying, what my article was saying, what Dara's said eloquently over the last few years, but also, what we're maybe trying to highlight a bit extra at the moment. It is that big, it is that significant. And actually, JP McCann came to me right after and said, is there any way you could furnish me with some data to back this up? It seems like it can't possibly be that much. And I said, I assure you it is. And Dara is probably the right man to do that. So I guess we've fulfilled that on this episode. You've saved me having to, do any simulations of my own, Dara, with JP. But look, this is something I know Matt Savage is very aware of, and he's trying to work hard on. It's something that we've been aware of for years with Unibet. As we said, we help make those changes to the online schedule. And also when you played Unibet Open live events, and if you look at the Deep Stack Opens of Alex Henry's as well, the Unibet Deep Stack Opens, they all sort of make you late reg that awkward stack, and there is a reason for it. There's logic behind what we've done there, and I think other organizers like Nick O'Hara and whatnot, who also help to put structures together, are starting to cotton on and realize this stuff, and maybe, just maybe, it will make a bit of a difference going forward. One final story before we go. Maureen, I'm conscious we've kept you here for a long time. That was a very worthwhile but a lengthy session there with Solver. I want to say that I've seen recently coin poker gather a bit of steam. It's been around for a while. I remember Tony G mentioning it years ago, but it seems to be gathering a bit more interest at the moment. Phenom Poker has just popped up and is going to launch at some point soon. And I have been wanting to cover these crypto sites at some point, and there's lots of them, but I'm thinking more about the sort of the high profile ones, I guess, like these guys who've advertised themselves on the idea of decentralization. That's a kind of a buzzword that they like to use, whether that's to do with how they conduct themselves in terms of the transactions, or if it's about how they outsource their RNG to a blockchain, sort of in theory independent third party to do the blockchain. Dara, I often get my knickers in a twist about how poker players are flocking to these types of grey to black sites and how they dodge KYC and transaction fees, and actually somehow at the moment sort of saying that that's a virtue and somehow makes them safer. I don't quite know how they can make that argument. You sometimes give me a dose of reality, saying ultimately most poker players are of a libertarian persuasion and pretty agnostic and unconcerned on that stuff. But above anything else, I worry about the safety of people's money, I suppose. I was there, for Black Friday, as were both of us. Am I being too much of a nanny on this one? Maybe Maureen, actually, can I turn to you on this one? Because I know Dara's point of view on this one. I would like your take. End of the day, if people know the risks, are they free to just take them? Or should there be some nanny-ish efforts made to protect them?
Yeah, I mean, people come to me for advice very often, and I just tell them, look, if it's an unregulated site, just don't gamble and play with money that you're not willing to lose. And if you do cash big, try to get the money off. If it's taking weeks or months to get the money off, come on, that's like a big red flag. Are you sure you want to handle this risk? For me, I'm here in Switzerland. We only have 2 license providers. For myself, I feel very comfortable playing on these license provider, knowing that they do, the KYC checks, knowing that I just press, withdrawal, and within 20 seconds it's on my account, there's no issues. And it just brings up the question for me, these other sites, if you're not doing your KYC, how are we checking for bots? How are we checking that players only have one account, etc.? I'm not saying these sites are guilty of it, but these are just questions that go through my mind. And I had gotten like a slew of new friend requests on Facebook, trying to, use my affiliate link on this new site. And I just look at the wording, look at how they're positioning this product. I'm like, oh my God, like I don't even know where to start. So hopefully maybe you can get like an expert on the blockchain to let us know how these sites are working. But for me, again, I don't have enough information to put 10K on the site and just play it down. I don't know.
Dara, turning to you on this one, like, again, you've had to listen to me, give out a lot over the years. And I suppose I do ultimately accept the view that people are allowed to take risks. We often would have talked about, sites, how you just wouldn't keep much of a balance on them. You might play on them, but you'd pull the money off immediately because you didn't really fundamentally trust what was going on there. But, like, how do you navigate this these days? Because I think by like a reasonable measure, black market, grey market app sites, and now these kind of crypto app sites are more than half of all of poker worldwide.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in terms of like how I personally go about it, like I kind of view it the same way as when somebody asks me for a loan. Um, I have a number between 0 and 100 on how likely I am to get that money back. And it's never 100 because even if the person is completely honest and, stuff happens, they might die, they might, I might die and they might forget me back. But some people will have a very high number, 98, 99, and other people will have a low number. And guess which group I'm going to try avoiding giving loans to? It's going to be the low number people. Same with the sites, like all of the regulated sites. I'm going to give them a very high number, 98, 99. Something would have to go drastically wrong for them to go belly up. But it's still not 100. I mean, everybody thought Full Tilt. Tilt was a very well regulated site too, and there was a lot of propaganda put out by the company about how the funds were sequestered, et cetera, et cetera. So you can never be certain. But then when I look around at some of the apps that, and similar to Morin, I get these messages all the time asking me, oh, do you play poker? Come play on my app here. And I give them a much lower number. And I think now we have a third category of sort of, they're not apps, they're actual poker sites. They look like a normal poker site, but they are bending regulations to varying degrees, either in terms of where they're operating, how they're handling deposits, and all that stuff. And like, as I do always tell you that, like, I think most poker players are naturally libertarian. It's just a case of like, do what you want as long as it's not hurting anybody. And I think the way poker is gone, where, for example, Americans aren't able to play online in most states anymore, that's encouraged players even more to be libertarian and say, well, look, those people want to play poker, and it's their government which is stopping them from it. And then you have cultural differences as well. Like when you talk about a regulation in somewhere like the US or the UK, generally people think about, oh, it's a bad thing. It's the government telling us what we can do and nanny state and all of that stuff. Whereas in many European countries, and I would include Ireland in this, regulation is often seen as a good thing. It's something which protects consumers. And that is sort of like the impetus behind a lot of European regulation. Now, sometimes it's misguided. Sometimes the regulators don't understand. They think they're protecting people in some way, but they're actually just making the situation worse. But nevertheless, the motivation is generally sort of try and protect people. And these shadier sites, let's call them, they kind of tap into the sort of like, oh, we're rebels. We don't want governments telling us what to do. And that plays very well with a certain crowd, but with another crowd, it sort of sends up a red flag immediately. And people do remember Full Tilt still, even though it was a long time ago. And there have been other examples since. At the very least, I think people like us have a responsibility to warn people, to tell them, you are risking your money. You're never 100% sure when you put money on a poker site that you're going to get it back. But some sites you can be 99% sure, or maybe even higher. And other sites, it's a much lower number.
Yeah, well said. The other aspect of this as well, Maureen pointed out that the KYC or the lack of them with these guys as well, is that you don't really know if you're just a pawn in some sort of money laundering operation as well. I think that's the underlying fear that I would have, is that like unknowingly I'm contributing towards, maybe some bad people moving their money around in a discreet way who actually should have law enforcement on top of them. But anyway, Sean Deeb and Jason Moe have been going hard at Phenom Poker this past week. I've noticed a lot of that on Twitter, suggesting that it's a bit of a scam. Now, Sean has always had pretty good instincts about legit and what's not legit in poker. And while Moe may be a self-professed cunty cake, he does know a thing or two about that crypto world, and he can decipher some of the stuff that they're saying that is confusing to people like myself or Maureen or yourself, Dara, as well. Like, we're no crypto experts here, nor would we claim to be. Anyway, I want to talk one final thing on this, which is about the people who are affiliating themselves with these brands. It does seem like the sites, Phenom in particular, in the last few months, have enrolled a lot of people to fear the patch, as is their hashtag. And I do wonder if they're starting to blur the line between ambassador and affiliate. Let's end on this aspect of it, actually. Maureen, we know from speaking to some of the people endorsing Phenom Poker and similar, say, dark grey market entities, many are calling themselves ambassadors, but their deals are actually more like affiliate deals where they get money if they sign players up directly. In my opinion, an ambassador very quickly loses their value if they're too shilly. That might come as ironic to some people who maybe feel like I, as an ambassador, do shill from time to time, which I do. But I think you have to be careful about how you do it, and I do take care on that. And at the same time, I think you have to be careful about ambassadors or calling yourself an ambassador if you're an affiliate. So the converse of that, because if you're an ambassador and something goes wrong in the site, you are representing them for better or worse, and actually should be carrying water for decisions that they make to some degree. And as an affiliate, you mightn't really feel like you want to do that. So interested to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think we're on the same wavelength here. Exactly that. If someone's an ambassador for the brand, like you and Dara are ambassadors for Unibet, I think if something were to go wrong, you would hold more of the responsibility. But as an affiliate, you're kind of just, click here on my link, and you get a percentage back. Sometimes I'm criticized in the poker world because I am quite critical about some brands I work with, or even sharing affiliate links, and for me that's okay, because that goes more along with my personality and moral code than others. So for me, to pass out that affiliate link, I would have to do more of a deep dive into the company, make sure I agree with their philosophy, agree with how they're handling money, agree with their reputation before they're passing out the affiliate code. But that's just me, and again, it's a personal preference, and I don't wish the worst on people who decide to be affiliates. But again, it's like, if something were to go wrong, are they all going to stick there and help me through it? Or am I just going to be there on my own?
Yeah, really well said. Well, look, on that note, on that maybe cautionary note, it has been fantastic to welcome you to the show, Maureen. I really appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks for having me again. And hopefully I'll see you somewhere around the world. Skipping Barcelona. I'll be going back to
Ooh.
Liechtenstein. Yeah. But yeah, I have to say close to home. But my next goal is just to beat you by one flag. I just need one flag to
Oh, is that
beat you
right?
on the yes, to beat you on the overall ranking.
I don't think I've been to a new country in a long time. You'll have me caught in no time, I'm sure. And you know what? We'll definitely see each other at the Malta Poker Festival in a couple of months. So I'm looking forward to that anyway.
Yes, me too. And then I'll probably catch Dara's new course as well, because his material is always great.
Excellent stuff. Well, look, Dara, thank you very much as well.
Thank you, and thanks, Maureen.